In every parable, there hides a fragment of truth. There's no need for complicated words or lofty wisdom. A simple story can enlighten the mind and warm the heart. These parables are not just tales. They are windows into the soul, signs left for those who seek peace, patience, and meaning. Listen to them with an open mind and a quiet heart. Perhaps you will discover something there that you didn't know you were missing. The parable of the abandoned well. In a small village on the edge of the plain, there was an old stone well. No one lowered buckets there anymore because the water seemed long forgotten. People went to the city and bought bottles of clear water, neatly arranged on shelves. It seemed more modern, safer, cleaner to them. The well remained covered in dust and weeds, a memory from other times. The years passed. People no longer gave even a thought to that mouth of stone. But one dry summer, the springs around began to dry up. The new wells, hastily drilled, went dry. The water bought from the city was no longer enough, for the roads were blocked. People grew anxious. Children cried with thirst, and the fields cracked under the sun. Then someone remembered the old well. A few people gathered, cleared away the weeds, and lowered a bucket. To everyone's surprise, the water was cold and clean, as if it had been waiting for them in silence. They drank, filled their jars, and the life of the village was saved by what they had despised and forgotten. It is the same with faith. Many look at it as something outdated, a relic of other times. They cling to novelties, to shiny things, to modern promises. But when the drought of the soul comes, when everything that is passing breaks, they discover that only the old spring still gives water. Then they return to him, the parable of the thread of twine. An old craftsman always tied his packages with a thin thread of twine. His apprentices watched and laughed, asking why he didn't use thick rope. They said the thread would break right away. The old man smiled and did not answer. Day after day, he went on tying with the same thin thread. One day, a mechanism in the village mill broke. Everyone tried to repair it with screws, thick ropes, and pieces of iron. Nothing held. Then the old man pulled his thread of twine out of his pocket. He wrapped it patiently in the right place, and to everyone's amazement, the mechanism started again. The weak thread held where brute force had failed. The apprentices fell silent, ashamed. The craftsman told them quietly that not everything that seems weak is useless. Sometimes it is precisely weakness that is the gift that saves. So it is with the humble person. In the eyes of the world, he seems helpless, without value. But in the hand of God, he becomes strong. Humility, patience, silence, small things in the eyes of people, are sometimes exactly what keeps a whole world standing. The parable of the forgotten candle. On a winter night, a storm put out all the lights in the village. Houses were left in darkness, and the cold felt heavier. In a family with 3 children, the parents worried about what they would do without light. The children were afraid. They couldn't cook. They couldn't see. Then the mother remembered that in a drawer, forgotten for years, there was a small candle. She rummaged around, found it, and lit it. Its thin flame lit the room, and the children's faces calmed. They began to sing carols around the candle and felt peace again. The neighbors, seeing the light in the window, came over. Each brought a candle, and gradually the darkness in the house receded. The whole village gained courage, because someone had had the wisdom to keep a small flame. Sometimes It is not big gestures that change the world, but the small ones. A kind word spoken at the right time, a prayer whispered in silence. A single act of love lights other lights and brings hope in the middle of darkness. The parable of the unseen stone. A great wall stood at the edge of a town. Everyone admired its beauty, but nobody thought about the small stones hidden deep within. Once, an earthquake shook the place. Many people ran away, believing the wall would collapse. Yet it remained standing. A child asked why it hadn't fallen. An old man showed him a small stone buried at the base of the wall, explaining that this one holds the weight. If it were missing, everything would crumble. So are the simple, modest people. They're unseen, they're not praised, but through their faith and silence, they support everything others admire on the surface. God sees and rewards not the sparkle at the top, but the quiet strength underneath. The parable of the forgotten bread. A poor woman needed a small loaf of bread every day. It wasn't much, but she always shared it with someone hungrier than herself. Her neighbors laughed at her, telling her to keep everything she had for herself. Years passed, and the village was hit by a severe famine. People had nothing, the granaries were empty. Then the woman found a few grains of wheat in an old pouch. She sowed them with a prayer, and the earth yielded fruit. From those grains, many families were fed. Those who mocked her understood too late. Goodness, no matter how small, is never lost. It bears fruit at the moment when everyone needs it. The parable of the crooked scale. A merchant had a scale that always tilted in his favor. He sold people less than they were paying for, but no one noticed. For years he piled up wealth, and everyone thought he was clever. One day, however, his son fell ill and needed expensive medicine. The merchant went to another market to buy it. There the scales didn't lie, and the money he had gathered unjustly was not enough. He lost everything. He understood too late that every deception comes back on the one who commits it. The crooked scale of today becomes the burden of tomorrow. The parable of the cracked mirror. In a village at the edge of the forest, a woman had an old mirror. The glass was cracked and stained, and the face seen in it was distorted and unclear. The children laughed at her, asking why she still kept it. One day, a stranger came to the village and asked where to find the way to the river. The woman showed him the mirror. Although the image was broken, the shards reflected the blue sky and the forest on the edge. The stranger understood the direction and found the water. Then the children understood. Even a broken mirror can show the light. So it is with our soul. No matter how wounded, cracked, or stained it is, if it turns toward God, it can reflect the sky and guide others. The parable of the forgotten seed. A child put a flower seed in a small box, but forgot about it. The box fell into a corner of the garden, covered by soil and rain. Years later, on that spot grew a great tree with strong branches and white blossoms. People gathered in its shade, weary after work. Birds made nests, and children played at its roots. No one knew where it had come from, but its blessing was for all. So it is with good deeds. They seem forgotten, small, leaving no trace. But in time, their fruit appears unexpectedly and feeds many. Nothing done with a pure heart is ever lost. The parable of the cracked bell. In an old little church, a large bell cracked. Its sound was no longer clear, but broken and jarring. People wanted to melt it down and make another. But the priest said they would leave it as it was. Its voice was different, but it touched the soul in another way. And so it was. When the bell rang, people felt a deep ache, as if it called them to remember their own suffering and God's mercy. Many cried while listening and prayed more sincerely than before. Thus, what had been a defect became a gift. And it's the same with people. Even a broken heart, if it beats for God, can call others to prayer. The parable of the leaf carried by the wind. A boy was walking through the forest and saw a fallen leaf tossed here and there by the wind. He laughed, saying it had no roots, it was weak at anyone's mercy. But the old man who was with him told him to look more closely. The leaf feeds the earth. It will rot and become nourishment for the trees. So the child understood that even things that seem useless have a destined path. In life, people who seem lost or carried by fate are not in vain. God finds a place for them, even in their end, and from their death life springs forth. Nothing is thrown away when it is in His hand. The parable of the one who gathered embers. A man had lit a fire on a cold evening. When the flames died down, only a few glowing embers remained. Instead of gathering them and fanning them, he went off to look for sparks in the forest, wasting time. Meanwhile, the warmth vanished, and night found him shivering. A neighbor asked why he hadn't kept the embers he had. From them, he could have rekindled the fire. The man fell silent, ashamed. So it is with the soul. Sometimes we run after big signs and wonders, but neglect the small sparks of faith within us. If we watched over them, they would flare up again. But because we forget them, we end up empty and cold. The parable of the small boat. On a great river, people praised the strong, spacious ships. They boasted of their oars and their billowing sails. But in an unexpected storm, the waters grew wild. The big ships overturned one after another because they were too heavy and could not avoid the waves. Only a small boat made of simple wood managed to float to shore. Because it was light and humble, it did not defy the waves, but let itself be guided by the water. Thus it was understood that it is not size and power that save you, but humility and obedience. And in life, it is not the great and proud who reach the good harbor, but those who let themselves be carried by God's will. We have reached the end of these parables. They are simple stories, but within them lie answers to life's silent questions. Each image, each event, reminds us that God often works through small and insignificant things, through patience, through humility, through the small deeds that bear fruit when we least expect it. If you have listened this far, take with you whatever touched you most. Let the rest settle in your soul and bear fruit in time. For truth doesn't impose itself by force. It settles slowly, like a seed that comes to life when the heart is ready to receive it. Thank you for listening. If you want to support me, you can subscribe to the channel. If you felt that something you heard speaks to you, give it a like. Stay, listen, come back for more. At first there was only me. Now we are together. Here you don't look for crowds, but truths. Truths that sit well in silence. Until next time, I hope you too will find your own path.